All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Letters of Intent. My name is Pankaj Raval. I'm the founder of Carbon Law Group. I'm joined today by my trusted co-host, Sahil Chaudry. Sahil, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, but not as good as you. I saw you at FIFA, Pankaj.
I
How was that?
I was, unfortunately didn't make it on the field, but was in the stands, had some good seats. Yeah, I decided to play a little risk and buy the tickets my friend won in the lottery. So my buddy in Arizona won the lottery and he's like, I'm not going to take them. You want to take them? I'm like, sure, let's make an investment. Maybe treat some clients if you guys are listening and want to be a guest at the World Cup. Hey, there could be a chance if you guys want to work with us. But yeah, I had a chance to go to the World Cup. So I went to the Bosnia Switzerland game yesterday, and it was fun. Just the electricity, the SoFi was so fun. The Bosnian crowd was like awesome, like super loud. The Swiss crowd was not quite as loud. It was funny. There was more Bosnians than Swiss there, but yeah, everyone was in good spirits and just having a great time. It was just one big party, and yeah, a lot of fun. It just reminds you of how we live in a very global world, and I feel like sometimes we forget
Yeah.
that, especially with the news and how we live in this world where there's so much value and beauty and understanding other people's cultures. And I feel like we got to do more of that. And I feel like if one thing FIFA reminds us that we are really a connected world and it's good to learn about other cultures. So it was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's so much news about wars that we need some events that are about bringing people together, and sport
Yeah.
definitely does that. It like
Yeah.
cuts through all the barriers.
Absolutely. And we're lucky too. He's got a lot of sports coming up. We
Yeah.
got FIFA, we got the Super Bowl, then we got the Olympics. So it's going to be a busy few years and a lot of fun. But if you get a chance to go to any of the games, I would say do it. It generally could be like a once in a lifetime experience. And I went with my brother in law. We had a great time.
So, Pankaj, there are a lot of exciting things happening right now, especially in the sports world. Now, our sports world is the world of M&A, and we've
Yes.
got some buzzy hot deals this week. So, we're going to dive right into them. Three big deals dropped this week, and they're really all asking the same question, which is when the music stops, who actually owns the thing that matters? And did they get it in writing? We're talking about PSAs. We're talking about purchase agreements. Number one, Fox buys Roku. This is Fox's attempt to get into the game of streaming. They've kind of been left behind here. And this is Lachlan Murdoch's first big swing since the succession fight. $22 billion to buy a direct line into 100 million plus streaming households. Wall Street hated the price as Fox stock dropped sharply on the news. Number two, we've got Paramount-Warner Brothers clears the DOJ. The biggest like for like Hollywood combination ever just got federal antitrust clearance with zero conditions. A little bit unsurprising considering the close ties of the Ellison family and the president, but it's still not a done deal. We still have the FCC, we've got foreign regulators and a coalition of state AGs that are still all in the way, and there is a September clock ticking. And finally, deal number three, athletes are buying in instead of cashing out a $500 million fund backed by LVMH, and 250 plus pro athletes made its first bet nearly $50 million into activewear Roback. And it flips the endorsement model on its head. We're talking about equity instead of appearance fees. I think athletes are catching on here that the value is baked into equity. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. The value, we see as deal lawyers is IP, equity. That's where you're really going to see your biggest pop. The legal backbone is an IP right that almost everyone names wrong. And we're going to get into that too. So I'm going to kick things off with deal number one. Pankaj, we've got Fox buying Roku. Do you have Roku? My parents have like that the box that gets you yeah, everyone has some kind of Roku or Roku alternative right now.
Right. Right.
Feels like a good move.
Roku, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of like the forgotten stepchild of some of these streaming services. For me, I don't have Roku. I may at one point had like a Roku stick that came with some TV or came, I think they have it installed on some TVs. So I don't know. I feel like they're getting maybe a B grade asset with Roku, but I don't know the financials behind it. Actually, let's look it up actually real quick. Well,
Yeah, so well, what you got here are the financials here. So Fox has agreed to acquire Roku for $160 per share, $96 in cash, plus Fox Class A shares. And we're valuing Roku at roughly $22 billion in enterprise value. So Wall Street did not like the price. Basically, the stock price dropped on the announcement of the deal, but it feels like a way for Fox to get in the game. Now, here's the important thing for you, our carbon community, that this is a mixed deal. We've got $96 cash and 0.9693 cents price per share of Fox shares in this deal. So there's some risk here because when you go with stock, the stock price could go up and it could go down. So
Yeah.
when you're making a deal for stock, which we do also on a small to mid-sized business level, make sure you're baking in that risk into the price of the stock. Your stock turns into a currency, which is really valuable. When you own stock, when you're a business owner and you have stock in your company, know that you're building up your own currency and currency that can be traded in the future for some kind of an acquisition. So remember that your stock is your currency. But when you're buying someone else's stock, know that just like currencies on the global market, that currency can go up and it can go down.
Yeah.
I also want to
Absolutely.
highlight that this deal is still subject to customary closing conditions, which you'll find on a lot of term sheets. So, when you're signing your purchase agreement, also, whether you're selling stock in your company or you're buying an asset, signing isn't closing. There are usually customary closing conditions, shareholder votes, regulatory clearances, and no material adverse effect conditions, all still that have to happen. So, remember, the deal isn't done until the money hits your account. Even signing the document doesn't mean the deal is done. People are your lawyers, and we as Carbon Law Group also, we're baking in a lot of walk rights. So make sure you know what those walk rights are when you're getting into a deal. And
Absolutely.
Pankaj, this takes us into the Paramount-Warner Brothers deal, which has cleared the DOJ. Is this unsurprising that it cleared the antitrust hurdle?
Not at all, honestly. I was hoping we'd get a little more scrutiny. I was hoping there'll be a little bit deeper look at it, but I doubt it. I feel like this is a rubber stamp that was always meant to be given to these guys, given our political climate. And I hate to be a naysayer or Debbie Downer, but this is the world we live in. And unfortunately, money buys access. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. I don't think there's another way to cut it, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at this deal, now there's still some regulatory hurdles ahead, and there's also an outside closing date in September. I was thinking about the kinds of deals that we work on, let's say with franchises, when a franchise is being sold or a franchise is being terminated. There are a lot of outside closing date related conditions. What is the outside closing date? And what does that mean? If we cross the outside closing date here because some regulatory hurdles fail, what happens to this deal?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And I think there's a lot of ways that the life cycle or lifespan of deals are extending. There could be earnouts if they have to hit certain revenue projections, right? Like a lot of times, I think if you're working with counsel who knows what they're doing, you want to make sure that you're de risking the deal as much as possible. That means that, hey, if there's certain representations being made about a deal, about the value of a company, make sure it's proven upon acquisition. You want to make sure that there's got to be some holdback to say, hey, you get the last 10%, get the last 20% only if it performs at the level you're saying it's performing. Because when you're buying a company, you're buying based on future earnings. You're buying based on the future performance of that company and your faith in yourself and your management to leverage that company in a way that will allow it to grow and your investment to grow. But if there's misrepresentations, if they're a little bit overzealous with the statement of earnings, and accounting is not always a science. It's very much an art a lot of times. And how things are categorized, how debt is considered. There's some things that are pretty complicated where you need very good professionals involved to scrutinize every line item on not only term sheet, but financials. So these are things you got to think about when you're buying companies. And with the amount of money involved here, you better believe that there's a lot of diligence that's happening. But I would say if you're buying a company and even a smaller company, think about, hey, earnouts, make them put their money where the mouth is or the mouth where the money is. I don't know, which is a better way of saying that. But I don't know, something sounds dirty about that. But make them prove it. Make them show that, hey, you're saying this is performing at this rate. You said it's performed like this for the last 3 years. All right, then you should be willing to maintain that it's going to perform like this at least 90% of what you're saying for the next 3 years, given I don't do anything ridiculous. So those are things you want to keep in mind.
There's one other element here which I found really interesting, which is Paramount has agreed to pay the $2.8 billion break fee that Warner Brothers owed Netflix and is absorbing that cost. I mean, does that make sense? Do we see that in our deals where, let's say, two people are in a deal and there is a penalty for backing out of that deal, but another player comes in and says, hey, you know what? It's worth it to me. I'll absorb that cost and I'll take it on.
Yeah.
I feel like we see this with hotels where there are termination fees, there are service termination fees, there are franchise termination fees where the buyer is saying, okay, you know what? I know you're going to have to deal with that cost. Let's share it. I need to allocate, or someone has to break some kind of contract, like a long-term contract. And then the seller says, hey, look, I'm into doing this. I'm okay with doing this deal with you, but I don't want to absorb all this cost related to all these terminations fees I'm going to have to incur. So
Yeah.
how,
Yeah.
how should a seller think about that? Or even a buyer is like, When is it worth it? How do you price that in?
A seller should be thinking about this like they're going to a club on the hottest night and they want to look the best possible. They got to get done up. You are there to be the most
Best.
attractive person in that club. And it's good to be wanted, right? It's good to be wanted. And that's the thing. Like the more you're wanted, the more sellers are going to be willing to give up to get you. And that's the name
Yeah.
of the game, unfortunately. It's not complicated if you think about it, right? And this is a situation where Warner Brothers has a very, everyone knows IP content is the gold, the new gold in the tech world, especially in the AI world, in the entertainment world. And as AI gets more involved in our society and takes over more jobs, we're probably gonna have more time for entertainment, right? So the future entertainment is not gonna be going away, how we consume it and how our taste may change, but entertainment is gonna be used more and more as people have maybe fewer things to do. So they see the value here. And I think that's why they've been willing to pay these break fees because they know how valuable of an asset this really is and what they think they can do with it. Now, can they do that with it? Is it this valuable? Are they going to be able to leverage it in a way that makes them more? Potentially. And when we see more oligopolistic, monopolistic transactions taking place that aren't going to be scrutinized or stopped by the FCC we're going to see probably prices go up too. And it's going to be bad for consumers. So we all have to take that into consideration as well.
So let's say if I'm a seller, I think the lesson that we can pull out of this is if you're a seller and you're worried about the termination fees you're going to have to incur when you're selling a business, hey, you might be able to push those fees onto your buyer if you have a valuable enough asset.
You should always ask. You should always
Yeah.
ask. And I think
Always ask.
always
That's
ask.
Harvard Law Group value. You should always ask.
Always ask. Yeah. I think it's like one of my favorite books is called The Aladdin Factor. And I think it was by the guy who wrote like Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield. And I always tell everyone, like my wife, my kids, you're never going to know if you don't ask. And I think in negotiations and M&A, any attorney that you have, you want to always ask. And I always tell people, we're going to ask for 10, we're going to ask for 100 things, and maybe we're going to get 30, if we ask for 100. The reality is we'll probably get fewer than what we're going to ask for. But, the more you ask for, then it's also a negotiation tactic. Then generally speaking, you'll probably get a little bit more too. If you ask for 10 things, you'll get maybe 3. If you ask for 100, maybe you'll get 30 or maybe you get 20, but that's still better than 3, right? So I think you want to think about negotiations like that as well.
Absolutely. Well, okay, now we're going to hit deal number 3, which is a topic that is near and dear to my heart and yours. Athletes as owners, LVMH's Champ Fund bets $50 million on Roback. Pankaj, this, as you know, I love the fashion industry, and you have been a fashion attorney as well, and you are an expert in IP. This deal has it all. There are M&A elements here, there are IP elements. So I'm going to hit you with a few of the facts. A $500 million fund backed by LVMH and more than 250 pro athletes, including Dak Prescott, Tyrese Halliburton, Mike Trout, just made its first bet, which is $50 million into a Charlottesville activewear brand that is best known for a dog logo. This brand is called Roback. Now, why is this deal different? These athletes aren't getting paid to wear the polo. They're buying a piece of the company. The endorsement is out and ownership is in. So here we go. Roback, it started in a camper van, never took outside money, and still crossed $150 million in revenue while staying profitable. Look, as someone who knows the fashion business, that is a huge achievement. And this is his first check ever. So I want to touch on a few M&A type elements and then a few IP based elements. And to start with the IP type elements, Roback was an early adopter of name, image, and likeness deals with college athletes after the 2021 NIL shift, building one of apparel's fastest growing collegiate athlete businesses, licensing businesses. Pankaj, can you talk us through why this is so valuable? Why is it valuable to license the name, image, and likeness of athletes? Why is this becoming such a big business, especially when it comes to college athletes?
Yeah, it's a massive business. The NIL economy is growing gangbusters. We're seeing athletes now. It's changing the whole dynamic of who's going pro and when and why, because now it oftentimes is more lucrative to stay in college and play and make the NIL money than it is to even be drafted to the pros. So it is interesting that how this is affecting college sports. And some would argue not in a good way. Some will argue that it's tainting the sport. That's another conversation in itself. But the reality is that now college athletes can earn for their name, image, and likeness, and that's changing the whole dynamics of how we value these athletes. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's a huge business, and why not reward your athletes for the work they've put in? So I think it's an interesting thing. I think it's fascinating. I think it was only a matter of time until we see these bigger investments in these funds, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for this going forward.
And I want to also comment on here the check that they're getting is for a minority stake, and Roback has successfully protected themselves in terms of their operational and creative control, which doesn't always happen. We see a lot of deals where minority investors want to come in, take a board seat, have veto rights, have rights over every major operational and financial decision. And it doesn't always make sense. But sometimes a brand is very eager for that investment and will sacrifice control rights, which have a long term effect for the short term cash. And we would generally advise against that. Stick with what feels fair. If you're the founder and you have majority control over the board, you have majority stake in the company, you want to have your minority shareholders have the rights, economic rights, but to the degree you can keep them out of the operational decision making, the better, unless it's a true strategic partner. But if it's not a strategic partner and you're just welcoming minority investors in, it's very frequent that they'll come in as preferred shareholders, and preferred shareholders can get a director seat or can have a vote when it comes to something that's negatively affecting their rights. But if it's not negatively affecting their rights, like you're not bringing on senior debt or senior equity or pari passu equity holders, then you want to keep them out of the operational and creative financial decisions, especially with something like fashion, where it's built on a secret sauce that's not totally understandable. You have a logo here that's valuable, but it's not like you're selling a commodity that's easily understood. This is a dog logo, and there's some X factor in an art driven business that sometimes only the founders understand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Pankaj, that wraps up our deal headlines for the week. What's the big headline lesson that founders can take away from these deal headlines? What would they be?
So, Sahil, I think the one common through line for all these deals is that they're all about distribution and leveraging the fame of brands. These are companies that have fame and content and IP. So you're thinking about, okay, how do you build in today's age? It's about leveraging IP, making sure your IP is protected, and making sure that you can license it or monetize it. And the only way to do that is by protecting it. So none of these deals would happen unless we have IP being protected. And that's the first thing. So if you're looking to leverage your company, leverage your brand, build your brand out, get investors, you want to make sure your IP is protected. You want to make sure you're enforcing your IP as well, because as we've covered in other episodes, that if you don't enforce your trademarks, if you don't enforce your copyrights, you could lose them. So make sure that you're enforcing them, make sure you're protecting them, and then making sure you think about, okay, yeah, how do you want to structure these deals in the future? How do you want to license that? How do you want to leverage that to extract the most value? And we're seeing a lot of opportunities for value extraction today across different types of industries and all different kind of brands, and new laws and regulations. We're in NIL is just opened the floodgates to what people can do in terms of leveraging their own brand at the collegiate level.
I think you're absolutely right. Brands are giving you access and IP. When Fox is buying Roku, they're buying a trusted name, and they're also buying their streaming service and library. I mean, why can't Fox just go into these homes? Well, Roku's already built the infrastructure. They've already built that brand name. Paramount wants Warner Brothers. Why? For its library. These IP assets are so valuable. Why are these athletes, why do they care about getting equity ownership in this brand Roback? Well, the IP is where the value is. That's what can be licensed. That's what can be sold. So everything else can be commoditized. IP is your most valuable asset. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this week's episode of Letters of Intent, where we break down the buzziest deal headlines and tease out the lessons for your real world legal and business issues. This is the podcast for risk takers and deal makers, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you all for listening, and like, follow, share for more, and good luck deal making.